good at quoting, but I always remember seeing this somewhere previously that all is necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men, and may I add, women, sir, to do absolutely nothing. I think we have reached a point in this country now where we must accept our responsibility of doing maybe not enough in days gone by when the horse pranced up a bit and was looking to find the stable door. We didn't do enough. I recall and I don't think some of the colleagues to my left were around at the time, meaning that they were born. But I recall back towards the late 80s into the early 90s, there was a debate in this country about whether there's a gang. And I also recall a newspaper, a nation newspaper that said united they died or united they fell. And that was making reference to the incident where it was an operation and three young men were actually shot dead by the police, executing their duty, rightfully so, in Melrose. I think we are very much prone, sir, to holding on to some interesting concepts. His Excellency has often used the term no retreat, no surrender. And that is in reference to how the military sometimes operate in a certain situation. The genesis of that lies in another concept called the firefight. And I would like to say that Barbados now finds itself, unfortunately, in a military scenario called the firefight. We are fighting now for our own existence. I don't think that there's enough cane corsos, pit bulls, bully, whatever they're called, the little tough-looking dogs that you can find in this country. I applaud the Prime Minister for continuing to allow for taxes to be removed from security systems. I hear every insurance company now advising people that they should get all type of cameras for the vehicle, dash cams, front, rear, side, back, all of these kinds of things. But there's an acceptance, sir, that we need to come to grips with. It is our fault. It is our fault. We are here today because it is our fault. It is not the fault of the young people. I have 3 kids, and arguably all of them are older than Senator Slocum. Actually, I have a granddaughter who may be a striking distance of his age, but it is our fault. It is our fault as citizens, and it is our fault as adults in this country that we are where we are today. In looking at various pieces of legislation and dabbling in the questions and asking questions, I came across, and I may be wrong, but the lawyers will correct me on this, the concept of a nuisance question. Is that such a term? A nuisance question. Correct, thank you very much. The nuisance question is fundamentally, basically, why are we asking the same thing? Where the guns come from is no longer a question worthy of being asked. It is already there here. Asking where they come from, you could answer that. They come from the United States, they come from Germany, they come out of Venezuela, they come out of Cuba, they come out of Jamaica, they come out of Buckley Yard, if you want to use those terms. As they used to one time, thank you very much, Senator. As they used to. The concept of guns not being manufactured in Barbados, there are a lot of people that will older people that will laugh at that comment. They will laugh at that comment. And that's a fundamental thing. The problem is that not only are guns manufactured in Barbados, but there are people who can repair guns. There are people who can, technically you can build a gun. You could go on, you know, there's pipe guns, there's this gun, there's that gun, all kind of guns. You just go on, you just 3D printing prints elements of it. You just got to understand metallurgy and you can put together a weapon. And it can do enough, it can do what it's supposed to do, depending on what you want it to do at the end of the day. But I would just like to simply add to this debate by simply saying that we need to accept. The older ones, maybe not the young ones, but the older ones certainly need to accept that it is our responsibility because it is our fault as to where we are today. The concept of talking about why are the kids can't read, that is our fault. We knew that the kids can't read. We knew that there are kids going into the 11 plus exam, and when the results are out, I think I heard the Honourable Minister of Education last night in a town hall meeting saying the results will be out in a couple of days. The reality will be that we will see those statistics. And we knew going into the race that that was going to be the number. There's nobody in the Ministry of Education that can tell me that they would not be aware that there will be children going into that exam who can't read. And if you can't read, you can't write. And putting a reader in next to a kid, I don't know what that means, but that happens. I will put somebody in next to this child because the child can't read, so that body reads for the child. But all of those children are going to be, will pass. They will pass. Whether they get 11, 2, or 10%, they will pass, and they're going to go to a secondary school. Whatever we choose to call it, it will be a secondary school in September. Who's going to read for them then? They're going to go in there because we know the system, and we know we're going to push them children out. At some point along the way, we are the problem. We are the problem. And we need to wake up to that and be able to move forward. Barbados needs, to the Honourable Minister, Barbados needs an exit strategy. You know why I said Barbados needs an exit strategy, sir? It's because when you reach a certain level in business, and somebody was to call the Honourable Senator Thompson for a job, I would hazard a good guess that she will not walk into that room and argue about, I need $30,000 a month. I think she's going to go in there with the contract and she's going to say, this is how I'm going to, sorry, pardon. I think she was going to go in there and say, well, if I am going to be fired from this position, this is the exit clause that I need. So you're going to pay me now 4 times this, and you're going to pay me this, you're going to give me that. Because that's what all CEOs do. The big ones, at least. They don't worry about how much money you're going to pay me, how much stock you're going to give me. They all go into the room understanding that when they don't make it, this is what you're going to pay me to leave the job. And that's the reality for us. So as a country, sir, we need to understand what is the exit strategy for all the decision makers when it comes to the fight and the move and the way forward. So we need to understand whether or not Barbados, as was mentioned, probably mentioned earlier, but I'll take it a stage further. How are we going to get all the hands of all the adults out of the cookie jar? Sir, how are we going to get the hands out of the cookie jar? We could bring the most elaborate scanners. We could buy the most sophisticated radar networks. We can buy whatever we choose to buy, drones. We can do all of these kind of things. But too many Barbadian hands are in the cookie jar. They have all been there already. I have a dear departed friend who was an economist, and he came to Barbados, and he said he always found Barbados to be the most interesting country that he's ever lived, and he lived in a lot of places. And I asked him one day, why would you keep saying that? And he said, because it's the only country that a man could tell you I could get something for you. Every single thing in Barbados somebody could get for you. You want 2 pieces of yams? Man, will you buy that for? I could get that yam for you. I can get this for you. I can get this for you. It's a society that somehow found its way over the years, nestled in acceptance of deviance, crime, whatever you choose to call it. All that's happened now is that we have reached this point now where it has gone a stage further. So the concept of guns, the concept of all these things are great and fabulous, but we need a whole of country approach. But I would like for the Honourable Minister to really be able to get up and say, well, effective, not if he can't do it right away, but over time, he can probably get up and say, you know what, we're going to declare an exit strategy for everybody in Barbados, and we're going to declare amnesty on all you. Go to church. Go and repent for all the deviance that you've done over the years. Because I can guarantee you that somewhere there is a book held by somebody that would say, sir, and I will use my friend, the Honourable Senator here, John King. I remember a couple of years ago, I gave $2,000 to turn a blind eye to the bag that come through the port. His name is written down. And John, Mr. King, sir, will be very scared, even if he's not involved in anything today, to go against anything. He will continue to always turn a blind eye for fear of the one time that he took something for it. So we need to accept that, and we need to find a way beyond just the normal sense of, oh, this is a solution to the problem, or that is a solution. We need to really find a way to get through to the young people that by virtue of our own experience in putting things in place that will make sure that things should happen the right way around. So we need to have a holistic approach, and I do agree with that, but the holistic approach is not as we may think. It has to be a general acceptance that we need to move the needle forward. And we need to move it forward, not necessarily with looking at the youth. We need to look at ourselves and the generation, well, in my case, I can say the generation just below me and the generation just beyond, because I said before, I have a granddaughter who is in her 20s. So I've got a couple generations to go. But starting with me, we need to be able to say, this is what we need to do. So unless all the hands clap, sir, and I applaud the government for all of the initiatives that have come into the room, but the reality is that all the hands have to clap. And if the hands don't clap, we will never get anywhere. I shared with Senator King the concept of a tambourine player. A tambourine, sir, is one of the most difficult instruments that you could ever attempt to play. As simple as you may think. You take that and you just go, tick, tick, tick. But you realize what's happening. You're hitting it here and it's got so many other little clangers, as they call them, or little cymbals all around there. To get that to play in time, to get all of those to sound, you've got to know what you're doing. And I am of concern that the reality is that we have not reached that point yet, where all the players are on the same hymn sheet and they're keeping steady time. And until we get there, all the legislation that we pass here, sir, we will not be able to get that forward. So with that, I would just like to ask the Honourable Minister, sir, to maybe pay some attention to a broader strategy, a holistic strategy that we can be able to move things forward to make sure that we treat to the big problem. And the problem is one for us and not necessarily all the problems for the youth. My final point on this is to also say to all others, and I have been saying this from day one, and it's not about the financial implications, but it is how we can actually holistically implement AI into our system. I know we talk about robotics, and again, that's the disconnect. We talk about robotics, we talk about this, we talk about that. But let's look at the power of AI. We sat here today and we talked about, oh, we have to get ballistic experts to actually come to our courts to do this. Well, if you check the bigger jurisdictions, right, the ballistic reports and the analysis is actually done by AI. And those machines will crunch that out for you in 5 minutes. They can tell you where the bullet came from, the trajectory, the range speed, the telescopic range. The basic can tell you what the guy did wrong if he missed the target. They can tell you what, it can tell you what he effectively did wrong to miss the target. So when you saw in the news, in other countries, when we saw shooters attempting to do certain jobs and they got it wrong, AI already said, well, next time you need to correct for the range drift. Your weapon was too light. The bullet was too light. These are the sort of things that you need to effectively look at. But we can effectively use AI, and we have to embrace it to be able to move forward. I know that Senator Reid would be keen, and I think he understands it better than I do. But those are the areas I think that once we get those things going, we should be able to speed up the process. But it's not necessarily all about speeding up the process at the end of the day. It's about how we approach, what are we going to do. We talked a lot about, sir, about having to provide witness protection. Well, the only witness protection program that I can conceptualize is that we get to into with a friendly country, and all the witnesses to significant issues in this country take their bags and their pack and they go where they need to go. In America and United States and those very big countries, they even have separate police forces that look after witnesses, the U.S. Marshals and all of those kind of different people. They're not policemen in the context that they belong to one body, but they're law enforcement agencies that specifically just deal with witness protection programs. And if we need to go there, that's, in my mind, where the entire Caribbean now comes in to play. But we are only, what, X long and a smile wide, as you're saying, would be for us. So we know exactly where we are. And in closing, I would simply say again, sir, that everybody in Barbados knows exactly where the guns come from. There is no secret. They know. They know. Having served in the military, there's no way that a 16-year-old have an AR-15 rifle at his house, right? And nobody don't know the AR-15 rifle in his house. It is not like this pen. And young people got a tendency to want to show off. So everybody knows where the gun, everybody knows who has a gun, whether it is legal or otherwise, and everybody knows where the gun that person has come from. If it's legal, they know exactly where it's purchased from. And if it's illegal, they also know exactly where it came from. But we've got to have a process that facilitates these things to make sure that these things will happen. So with that, sir, I will close by saying that Barbados is really in a fair fight. And we really need to accept our responsibility in this fight. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Nelson. Senator Benjamin.
Mr. President, I rise this afternoon to share my voice in this debate, the Supreme Court of Judicature Amendment Act. Mr. President, I think we're at Edom here in this chamber that this is a bill that supports the fight against crime, the holistic approach that this government has taken. And this particular bill, it is short, but it is powerful. And it resonates with me in a special way because it allowed me to reflect on my formative years at the bar, where I did practice criminal law. And so I had the opportunity, and I've shared that in this chamber before, to represent from the most serious of offenses to the most trivial of offenses. And one of the disturbing lessons that I learned during my years at the bar is that the principles of economics and business also apply in the criminal arena. So I heard Senator Trim make the point that guns are for hire. I also want to make the point that there are murders for hire as well. All right? And so the increased availability of firearms has driven down the price of violence. And I'm not going to expound on that very much more, but just for this chamber to understand that because of the prevalence of the firearms, the cost is not as high. So I've encountered matters, Mr. President, involving individuals who willingly commit serious offenses for amounts that cannot even cover their bill costs. And that is the reality and the severity of what this honorable chamber is being asked to inspect. The reality is that most offenders do not sit down and conduct a cost-benefit analysis before committing a crime. What they do fear, however, is getting caught. What they do fear is the moment when they have to face the music. That is when you really see how people are feeling in that moment. So they ultimately fear a system that moves swiftly enough to hold them accountable. And that, Mr. President, is where this bill finds its greatest value. Because the whole point of this bill is to assist in moving justice along quickly. And if that's where their fear lies, then I do support this bill, and I do believe that it will have the impact that we expect it to have. Mr. President, I believe that the history of this country deserves to be spoken aloud in this chamber. It was mentioned briefly, but I recall when I first came to the bar, there truly were only 2 sitting criminal assizes. Currently, in 2026, there are 8. And I say that to say that we have therefore seen the benefits of having greater capacity in the criminal courts. So we are not fishing and hoping that an additional 2 judges and a firearms court that specializes in dealing with those offenses will bear its fruit. We know that it will, because we have seen the backlog reduce. It's not totally eliminated, but much to the credit of those 8 sitting criminal judges, we have seen things happening in this country, things moving quickly along. Much to their credit, Mr. President, they have organized themselves in such a way that some courts are dealing with the backlog and some courts are dealing with the present matters that are coming before the court. Is it perfect? No, but we are seeing improvement. And therefore, this bill is not a leap of faith. It is a continuation of something that is already proven. More capacity, properly deployed judges will create better outcomes. There's no doubt about that. And the firearms court or the gun court is simply this government saying, let us apply that lesson deliberately in the area where it is needed most urgently. And Mr. President, I just want to also make the point that by increasing the capacity of the judges and having 2 more, it doesn't mean that we are only focusing in on firearm offenses. In fact, what that does is to create space so that all the other serious offenses, whether it is murder, whether it is drug trafficking, whatever it is, the other courts still have that capacity to deal with those things. But we are zeroing in on the firearm offenses. Mr. President, the real reason that I stood today to lend my voice to this debate is because I want to raise an issue, a concern of mine, but I don't do so without providing a viable solution. We often speak about judges, we speak about prosecutors, we speak about police resources, but the truth is that in the criminal justice system, for the wheels to turn effectively, we need to really speak about the capacity of the criminal defense bar. I fondly recall my years at the criminal bar, when a typical working day can see me from Old Town in the morning to St. Joseph, to Oistins, back to the Supreme Court in town. And that was not a special day. That is a typical day. Without lunch. And I am paying for the consequences now. And that was when there were only 2 sitting criminal assizes. Now we have expanded, and the truth is, the number of criminal defense attorneys have not expanded. And so, the numbers, the people at the criminal bar, sometimes we hear judges saying, you know, but I'm looking for so-and-so. And the attorney who's in the court, because we all work well together, no matter what chambers you're from, would say, oh, but that judge is before, that attorney is before so-and-so. And so, the reality is, no, scheduling it will not make a difference. The problem is that there are too few attorneys practicing criminal defense. And sir, I said that I will not stand without offering a solution. And so I think perhaps the day has come that we may need to start having some kind of national conversation around a public defender model. What does that mean? It means that you may have attorneys who are stationed in courts and their job is to treat to the matters that are in that court, and they are defense counsel. Because people have the right to choose, yes, right now, under legal aid, and what really happens is that people keep choosing the same attorneys because they have the right. But then it slows down the arms of justice. So I am not necessarily suggesting that we do away completely with legal aid, but there may be a need to see how we can merge the two models so that we really get the best of what this bill is intended to do. And before I take my seat, Mr. President, I also want to address what may be an elephant, not in this room, but in some rooms, which is we need to give grace, I think, to young counsel that approach the bar. I remember my early days. Luckily for me, I first approached courts with my senior counsel, who was respected at the time. But I have witnessed, who's respected? I'm so sorry, who is respected? But I also, and as a result, I got that same level of respect at the bar. But I have witnessed attorneys, young counsel, be embarrassed to the point that they don't want to come back. And I want to say in this space that we need to find perhaps a different approach. Yes, criminal law it's difficult, and yes, you want counsel to be nimble on their feet, but every senior attorney, including the Honourable Minister, would have had a time at the bar where they weren't so sure of themselves, and somebody guided them. Somebody allowed them to make mistakes without embarrassing them in front of their clients. And so until we get to the stage where we can institute perhaps the public defender model, maybe we can be a little less I don't know. I don't want to use the word toxic, but
It's a learning tool, don't worry.
yeah. Grateful. So, in conclusion, Mr. President, criminals fear many things, but above all, they fear a justice system that moves quickly. And this bill strengthens our ability to deliver exactly that. It is a measured reform grounded in experience and driven by necessity. And so for those reasons, I fully support this bill and commend it to this chamber.
Thank you very much, Senator Benjamin. Senator Reverend Canon Dr. Rogers.
Good afternoon, Mr. President and colleagues of the chamber. I rise to say a few words on this Supreme Court Judicature Amendment Bill 2026. But if you would permit me to just segue into it by acknowledging that today is the feast of Saint Marina the monk, a very rare saint that many people do not hear about. It's the patron saint of pregnant women, girls, and transgender parents. Yes, because it was a woman who... Saint Marina, if you would permit me, sir, just...
I'm very curious, please pass on.
Saint Marina was a young girl in the 5th century. Her mother died young, and she grew up with her dad. And when she got to the marriageable age, the father was ready to marry her off to a gentleman and then go into a monastery. And she told her father, well, if you're going to get eternal life and leave me out here in damnation, I'm going with you. So she shaved her head, dressed as a man, went into the monastery and stayed there. Her father died 10 years later. And then she was accused of fathering a child. People put that on her. And she accepted it because she didn't want to reveal her identity as a woman. And over time, when she eventually died, the monks realized I was actually a girl and not a man. So she's observed, she's recognized as the patron saint. But I've pointed that out because it segues into this bill that we're dealing with here and what some people consider to be the underlying challenges, and that is the underlying societal issues. And one of the things that St. Marina was trying to get away from is the way that women were treated in her society. In fact, in the early church, one church father said, a woman should be ashamed at the thought of being a woman, but that's a different matter. And so to get away from that, she went into the monastery and lived as a man and raised the child that she was accused of having, which she couldn't have, of course. Minister Nichols, in his presentation earlier, said that we should treat this as a national health issue, a disease. So gun crime in Barbados has become a chronic wound. And I believe that in Bajan parlance, it's been going on so long now that we can call it a life sore. So the question here today, as Senator Goodrich would have said earlier, it's not about whether the legislation is necessary or whether the legislation is good. It is good legislation, and I believe it is necessary at this point in time. We all accept that we're dealing with a serious problem and challenge in the stability of our society at this time. But it is not new. And I think this is where we must really be honest with ourselves, that this is not new. We've been throwing solutions at this problem for decades. I remember back in the day, and somebody mentioned Buckley's, but St. George was the place where it was believed that the guys had the skill to manufacture pipe guns. And they had gotten so good at it that they had incorporated it into bicycle parts. So a man would be riding a bike and pull off a piece and shoot at you. You know, so it's not, this has been happening a long time. It was so bad that we once brought in a crime consultant who himself got robbed, but that's a different matter as well. And then another time, it was alleged that armored gear was being brought in to crack some skulls, etc. So we've been trying to deal with this for a very, very long time. In 2001, Barbados established the task force, the Barbados Police Force Task Force. That's how far back we were trying to wrestle this issue to the ground. And the minister would have mentioned some calypso back in the past. He mentioned spices, guns, too many guns in this town. But we had the mighty Gabby singing Arm the Police. We had our own colleague, Senator John King, saying, let me get that song. How many more? We had young Miguel singing Gun Town. Barbados is now a gun town. So these things have been there a long time. All that has happened is that it has seemingly gotten worse. And it has come to what I've been saying for some time now. Barbados is 166 square miles. The difference between the block and the heights is a chain link fence. And so when it starts getting over the chain link fence, that's when things start, getting serious for some. A chronic wound, as medical practitioners would tell us, usually persists for a long time. And when it persists beyond a particular time, it means that the real problem are underlying conditions. Poor circulation, diabetes, some other underlying condition. we have serious underlying conditions. That's why this is persisting. I think in 1989 it was the Red Plastic Bag sang the song "The Country Ain't Well," and he pointed out some of what can be considered some of the underlying conditions. I'll just touch a few today, because this debate today is no different really from the debate we had a few weeks ago when we were talking about gang violence, etc. But I want to point at the fact that what we are seeing in our community is not just the fault of a few young boys with guns. It's not even the fault of only those who are brain thin. It's a whole society problem. And until we start accepting responsibility as a society, we're not going to fix this. Because, as Senator Niles would have said, the only thing necessary for evil to flourish is for good people to sit back and do nothing. I believe Desmond Tutu put it another way: to be silent in the face of oppression is to be on the side of the oppressor. We have to accept our role in all this. And so, for me, I wish to quote 1 Peter 4 and verse 17. Judgment begins with the household of God. The faith community in Barbados. Let's look at the history of faith in Barbados, because it was only in 1969 that the Anglican Church ceased to be, well, 69 into the 70s, that the Anglican Church ceased to be the established church in this country. And yes, I'm a part of that church, but I also have to accept what it was brought here to do. It was brought here to support the status quo. It was brought here to shape a society that people will become acceptable to what was taking place and what the other organs of the society would have been doing. And it did a tremendous job. Its job was so good, I'm being sarcastic here, its job was so good in supporting the other structures of the society that in 1966, when we declared ourselves a free people and a free nation, we accepted a constitution where the preamble said, whereas the love of free institutions and of independence has always strongly characterized the institutions of Barbados. That's still our constitution. That is how trained the mind of this society was. That a society that produced the slave code and all those things, the people who are now free will say, we've always been characterized by free institutions. I've highlighted that to say, if the church was that influential in shaping the mind of the society in that way, the church should be just as influential in shaping the mind of the society in a positive way to deal with the needs of the challenges of the 21st century. And here I'm using church as a collective now because there's no established church. And so faith-based organizations have to look deep within themselves and ask themselves, what are we really doing in the face of all that is taking place within our society? And I've raised it because I'm speaking of myself first, sir. And so part of the challenge has to be the role of faith-based organizations in this country and how they will intentionally shape or reshape the minds of our people to build a community, not a community founded on the slave society anymore, but a community of free people who value the other. And that is our role and our challenge in this society at this point in time. Similarly, our education system. Unlike many, I remain very proud of the education system of Barbados. I'm very, very proud of what it has done, the strides that it has made since independence, but that too was structured to maintain the status quo. And over time, we have produced some great people, some great academics, etc. But what has happened with our education system is that, similar to what happened in Jewish culture with wisdom. When wisdom first emerged, the book of Proverbs and some of the other primitive wisdom texts, it was really about persons who were adept in whatever area of life, whatever skill they had. So the midwife was wise. the man who created poems was wise. Over time, wisdom became only about those who knew the law. Translate that to our education system. It has become only about those who are academically inclined. And so the skilled artisan who can create things and do great things is not given the same prominence as the academic. And for those of us who, well, not me, I lived in a different place in a different time, so. But for those who can remember an old Barbados, you always heard, as I left school, my mother said, all right, you ain't staying home, come and get a trade. Buy a hammer or a saw or something, and you're gone. Because that was seen as a way for upward mobility and progress. So we produce great artisans, and we still continue to produce great artisans, but as I've said, our mindset has shifted to the point where academia is held as being more important and more prestigious than the arts. And to this I wish to commend the principal and deputy principal and the members of staff of Frederick Smith Secondary School, sir. We just had a ceremony yesterday where our deputy principal, Mr. Ford, took 15 boys who were given trouble in school, and rather than sending them home, he brought them in. I remember when he used to have them outside his office in the little area there, and he managed to get some sponsorship to start a program in agriculture and hydroponics. They built their own hydroponic system. They grew their own stuff. They grew mint bush and then made ice cream from mint ice cream. So I think that ought to be commended and ought to be encouraged, because, you know, so that these boys, of course, we also won the Young Leadership competition a few weeks ago by our youngsters, thanks to the science department, created papercrete, little plant pots, etc., from paper. And, well, the science of it, I don't know, but they did it. So congratulations to them. I'm just saying that these are things that need to be highlighted and replicated elsewhere to encourage our young people to realize that these skills are important too. I believe it was Martin Luther King Jr. who said, if you're going to sweep streets, be the best street sweeper you can be. There's something good in honest work, and we ought to encourage that. But of course, not to regurgitate much of what has been said, family is also important. Our societies was built on families. And it was built on respect within the family. A lot of us didn't do bad things because we were good. We didn't do bad things because of what it would do to our mom or our father or our grandmother and how they would look within the community. Not because we were that good. But there was this level of respect because the elders had already set up barriers for us and told us this is what, this far and no further. And we understood that. I fear that subtly those barriers have been eroded. And I would like to say that one of the areas that has caused the erosion of these barriers is social media. I remember, sir, when I was at school, and that was not long ago, fights would break out if a man told a man something about his mother. That's a serious thing. But I can't see any youngsters fighting about their mother anymore when a man could pull a phone and say, well, look here. Look at how she looks here. Look at what she was doing. You know? They might still want to fight, but you really have no case. And social media has blurred the generational lines to the point where the respect that used to be accorded, and even if it is not the generational line between you and your mother or grandmother, is because you're seeing someone else's mother or grandmother in a compromising situation, those lines are now blurred, and you comment on it too. You get to comment on it. And so all these things subtly, I believe, when done a study, have caused the erosion of our society. I don't have the solution on how we can build back that respect, but I believe it has to start. I believe there was one commentator years ago, and now of blessed memory, when we were talking about the problems with young people in the society, called in on one of the radio programs and said, what we need to do is get rid of this whole generation and start fresh. No, we're not going to do that. But what we really need to do is to, the little ones that we have in our care, every little bad boy out there who wields a gun now at 14 or 15, if I could go back to his first day at school, somebody was holding his hand, taking him to nursery, and he was crying because he was scared. He was scared. And he trusted this person that carried him. He relied on them. Somehow, the ball has been dropped. And so we have to go back and deal with our young ones that we have and make sure we provide safe spaces for them, but also nurturing spaces. And of course, if we're going to talk about family, we have to talk about leadership at every level of the society. And I believe that it was Senator Slocum who talked about leadership and what persons are doing, and I believe Senator Niles as well, and Senator Trim. I'm going to quote some calypso, sir, if you permit me. I have to. From 1971. You weren't born yet. Neither was I, but that's a different matter. It became the staple in the 1970s and early 80s for political opposition parties. Whenever a political opposition party was going into battle for election, this would be the song that would be playing as they moved around the village. The Mighty Sparrow's Good Citizen. When does someone really become a good citizen? I would like to know somehow. And in one stanza he says, in lust and greed and fraud and strife they specialize. Double deals they idolize. If you're brave enough to open your mouth and criticize, one time you are ostracized and or victimized. So they go unpunished and unaccused of any crime, while on the backs of the ordinary man these vultures climb. They use their riches and their power, make a mockery of the law, and have the law protect them at the same time. And in a million different ways, they violate the law. These good, no-good bastards who oppress the poor. They control in bootlegging, dope peddling, prostitution, and piracy. These good citizens are the architects of economic slavery. So we come back full circle, because the problems, the structural problems in the society are created by some of the very good citizens that we have in our society, who are supposed to be shaping the minds of our people. And so my question for us, for those in positions of leadership, and not political leadership, but just general leadership within the community, my question is, who in Barbados so abhors the peace of this society that they would bring guns in to destroy our citizens? Who are you? I would not speculate, but I suspect, as Senator Niles says, we know who some of them are. And of course, no society can function without a strong legal system, a strong judicial system. And so I support the setting up of the new court and the appointment of the new judges to deal with the societal scourge of the crime. But the question is, will it heal? Will this heal the problem? And the answer is no, because we cannot legislate morality. We cannot legislate the shaping of a society. It has to be everyone working in their own sphere of influence to make a difference. And as I said, I began with myself, so I am as guilty as anyone else. Another question is, will this legislation make the court any more efficient than others? This court any more efficient than others? I see the lawyers nodding. I am happy that Senator Benjamin clarified what happens to defense lawyers and what they go through. Because I had a little question here, which I'll still raise, but I accept that it may not be so now, but I'm just asking for a friend. Has the delay in criminal cases become a standard tactic in defense of a client? I just asked him for a friend, nothing, you don't have to answer it. As I said, I accept your explanation of running from here to there, but I was getting the impression as a layman that every time you turn up to court and the lawyer is not there, the case gets pushed away, and I happen to be a part of that. I happen to experience that in years ago when I was a young teacher, so that's a long time ago. I had a case with a young lady who had confided in me as her teacher about something that was done to her. Naturally, as a young male teacher, I took it to the guidance counselor. Parents were brought in. Parents decided they were going to take the matter to court, etc. I was the teacher, the form teacher of a third form, sir. I went to Cotterill and did a whole degree, and that case wasn't finished yet. And so while I accept the explanation, because sometimes you go down to the court, the lawyer can't come. The lawyer, it's put back again, it's put back again, years. As I said, it was in third form. That case was not finished until that girl was in sixth form. Luckily, she had a strong family background that helped her. But think of the countless others who don't, who have their self-esteem destroyed. Think about the young person who's accused of something and has to walk around with that accusation on his or her back over and over for years. And that's why I just asked the question. I hope that this court will be more efficient than what has been taking place. And it comes back full circle, you know, because as I said in my last speech, sir, whether we wish to admit it or not, we live in two Barbaduses. And there are two economies. There are also two justice systems. The justice system for which this legislation is being created is a justice system that has backlogs. The other justice system, justice is swift and final. And so, if backlogs are going to continue to be a part of the culture, we will not be a part of the solution, we'll just be adding to the problem. And so I want to encourage us. I commend the government for bringing this legislation, but I just want to encourage all involved, is to let us make this as efficient as possible so that we get these cases tried as quickly as possible and justice served as quickly as possible. With those few words, I thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Reverend Canon Dr. Rogers. Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was not planning to speak earlier, but the truth is, having worked in the system itself, and I sat here, and you may have seen me leave for a little while, and I had to leave. There were two things that happened. I started to remember the very song that you spoke about, 1996. I wrote that song. When I wrote it, it was because of the death of a young man whom I had worked with. Last year, during we gathering. Another young man who I worked with lost his life to gun violence also. I was then asked by parents to make an appearance, pardon the pun, at the funeral to sing the same song. Unfortunately for me, my work schedule at the time did not allow me to do it. Believe it or not, that is something that has kind of like haunted me since that day. And as I sat here listening to the conversation, I realized then, and I listened very carefully to the Honourable Minister ask the question about what the entertainment fraternity can do, and I listened to the Honourable Senator also speak about what he thought or what he believes they can or cannot do. The truth is, as we just witnessed by the lyrics of that song, the artists have been for many years speaking about various issues in the territories where they live, crime being one of the more prevalent ones. But there's a problem, which in my position, I guess people would figure that I should not speak about it, but I have to, because at heart, I love this country. And this country has given me everything that I could ever dream of. But the truth is that sometimes when these songs are written, various governments take them as personal attacks, not understanding that where they come from has nothing to do with politics, but it has to do with a genuine concern for the place you call home. And it is in that light that I got up and left a little bit earlier. Because at some points of this debate today, I started to feel as if some of us were making laughing sport. This is too serious an issue to have any sort, any inkling of political divide. Imagine tomorrow that it could be a relative of any one of us, that a gun destroys your family life. Stray bullets, intentional or unintentional, stray bullets don't pick out anybody. They go where they go. I had an incident last year in regathering next door, Golden Square, Antiques Market. I left there to go and do something. When I come back, my wife is shaking. Fellas right through there with motorcycles and blah, 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 automatic weapons. She got to be diving like if she is a soldier on the ground. These things are real. Some of us, we could come in here and try to score all the political points in the world. It will not negate the reality of what we face. And so I feel that when we come to deal with things like this, we have to look at the bigger picture. There are a number of pieces of legislation that have come before the Senate and the other place, which coincide with this legislation in this government's attempt to at least make a dent into crime and crime-related matters in this country. You look at the mutual assistance one, you look at the cybercrime bill, you can take a look at the interception of communications bill. All of these things put together, when you put them together, are there to help us deal with a problem that is ever changing. Crime in 1950 ain't the same crime as 2026. Crime in 1996 is not the same as it is in 2026. Criminals always ahead. They're always ahead. And governments and police and all the law enforcement always have to be catching up, because an antisocial mind spends its time working out how does it be antisocial. It don't work out how it can save the world or how it can help the world. It studies and computes, how do I beat systems? How do I go against the law? How do I do things and get away with it? And until we begin to understand that, because oftentimes we place a lot of emphasis on saying that education is the thing that is going to change these people. But let me give some of you a wake-up call. Some of the world's most destructive people, and I say the world's most destructive people, are considered to be some of the brightest people that the world produced. The man that produced an atom bomb, he was at the dunks, but he produced an atom bomb to do what? Kill thousands of people in Japan. The people who do warfare and have chemical bombs and all these things, they're not idiots. They're extremely well-educated people. The problem is they're also antisocial. But nobody wants to deal with that. And so the emphasis now for us has to be, as was mentioned by most persons in here, and I 100% agree with them, it has to be multifaceted. You have to, yes, education will play a part, but there are other services that we need to look at, that we got to get into communities with social workers and other things like that. We have to find other outlets and channel them for young people who may not be so academically inclined. What are the other things that we are going to get them in? And then the other thing we have to do is to stop believing that all education is to get you a good job. Because most of us growing up, this is what we were told: go to school, learn well, and get a job. There's no conversation about what your contribution to your society, your community level first, and then the society at large, what is expected of you as a member of the society. Or what your talents that you have, that you can actually use them to enhance the life of the people around you. And as was mentioned earlier, even the persons who have those talents, sportsmen, musicians, artists, all these things, the same society scoffs at them. Because we believe that the savior of everything is the almighty dollar. And so we measure how we respect people based on the amount of income that they can generate. Well, if you live in a society that operates like that, a little fella who has no education, he does not believe he has any skills, he does not have anything of any worth, what will he seek to do? Get money. Because when you get money, you get respect. Or he may look across the thing and think to himself, but this person here tell me to go to school and learn well, by making more money than he or she. Yep. This is the reality. I work in the system. So when I talk, I'm not talking because I got nothing else to do. I talk from a place of being right in the mud, where it all starts. And I know the difficulties that we have had. And I've spoken about this a million times, and I will say it until I die. that oftentimes with these younger persons, you give 3 years, 5 years, whatever the amount is, they are still going back into an environment that has not changed. And so that everything that you would have done, all of the progress that you have seen made, is wiped out in about 3 weeks, because they have to fit back into the place where they are going to live. And so whilst this legislation is well needed, believe you me, I support it 2,000%. Because the mere fact that you have backlogs and all of these other things create more problems. I mean, just think about it. You're a parent. I want you to just imagine for a minute that somebody shot your child. And your child died. They might not have done it intentionally, but it happened. That child is dead. Would you not want swift resolution to this? Yeah. Imagine if you could see the person walking up and down in front of you, or even standing laughing in your face. The other thing I want you to consider is that if we don't wrestle this thing to the ground soon, good citizens, not the ones that you spoke about, but real good citizens, are going to find themselves in a position where they may believe that they have to take matters into their own hands. They may have to take matters into their own hands. And you spoke about the song, How Many More? But that was only one of 2 songs I sang that year. There was a song called Fool's Paradise. And in that song, the line went, we becoming like the wild, wild west. We soon got to walk in bulletproof vests. 1996, I saw it then. And in 2014, I wrote a song called Mr. AG. And in that song, I said, you may very well have to bring back the gap and hanging, because criminals or bandits are taking advantage of good citizens. An observer had a cat attack, and various people over the years have commented about where we were going at that time and where we are today. And we need, at some point in time, you have to take some decisions that might not be popular, but they could be effective. We have doctors in here. When you got cancer, people do all kinds of things to survive with cancer. They take radiation. They go in the body and cut out parts. You do whatever you need to do to ensure that the patient survives. We are talking now about a society and a way of life. This country has been a shining example, like it or not. Some people would say otherwise, but I know through my travels, when you say you are a Barbadian, there's a different approach to you with people all over the world who know about Barbados. It don't come from a place of like you are some sort of vagabond on it or so. I remember being at university, and all one of my lectures would do is talk about his time in Barbados and how it was so orderly and how he got stopped by the police and they treated him a certain way. And sometimes I used to feel a little off because you could see all the other students from the Caribbean in the class getting a little antsy about it. But the point is, we have set such a high standard and example for the rest of the Caribbean to follow. And we can't take these things lightly. This court, this firearms court is necessary. It is necessary. Look, it is nothing new either. I wanted to tell one of the senators who asked why. We also did, when it was necessary, a drug court. When it was necessary, we also made a family court to deal with specific matters that were of concern to the society. This is just another effort by this government to ensure that these matters that need urgent attention can be addressed in a manner that, one, is fair, and two, that is timely, and in three, that is effective. Now, are you going to get everything right? No, you won't. But as was mentioned 2 times in here, and I will mention it again, people quote from various philosophers and different things that they read and they follow. Well, I am, by religion, a Scientologist. And one of the things that you are taught very early in Scientology is that the wrong thing to do is nothing. You have a problem in front of you. You don't just look at it. You attack it. You might fail 100 times, but on the 101th time, you get it right. But you have to do something, because if you don't do anything, the problem still remains. It could probably get bigger, but it will not solve itself. And so these measures that we are taking today are just part and parcel, as I said from the beginning, of a whole set of different parts of legislation to tackle crime and the effects of crime in this country. And so I really just wanted to say those few words, because to be honest with you, Mr. President, this has been very, very difficult for me. And unless you've been in anything like teaching or working with children, you would not understand how difficult it is when you can see, especially young people who you've worked with, who you can see the potential in them, and their lives are cut short, oftentimes all because of a gun. And as was said, yes, we might not produce them in those numbers, but I'm one that grew up. I grew up in St. Philip, and I grew up just outside St. George, and that growing up, that was the thing all the time. You hear all the time, Buckley factory and guns. Right? We grew up hearing these things. Yeah, we grew up hearing these things, right? But where I believe we now need, we've got the courts, we need to put the interventions in the communities now, so that our young men in particular, would have a different way of thinking about getting involved with guns. And I'm going to close now, but I want to say this to the young men out there. If someone brings a gun and gives it to you, there are only 2 outcomes when you use the weapon. One, you may kill someone. If you kill someone, you then are the subject of a reprisal. And if you escape the reprisal, you are a subject of a murder case. You can end up in prison, and I can tell you from working through those systems, time flies and leaves you behind quickly. Because if you are not out in the society, the changes that take place, you don't know. You come back out, you're lost. It's time lost, and it can never be regained. So I would say to you, I would say to your fathers in particular, talk to your sons. If you're not involved in their lives, make an effort to get involved with them and steer them away from the use of illegal firearms. Because at the end of it all, it isn't just the victim who suffers, but the perpetrators and their families also suffer. With those few words, sir, I really am obliged to you.
Thank you very much, Senator King. Her Honor, Senator the Most Honorable Henrietta Elizabeth Thompson.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, the Most Honorable Reginald Farley. I have to remember it. This is an interesting debate, but it is a painful one. There are two things that are running through my head. One is something that I heard many years ago, and it is that guns are the only consumer item that kill when used precisely as was manufactured. It is absolutely true. The second thing that is running through my head is a video that I saw on social media perhaps 3 months ago now. In the video, there were two young men. One was boasting about how much of a bad man he was, and between the two of them, they had weapons, automatic weapons, and if I remember correctly, a rifle. And as he was boasting, he was playing with the gun and fingering the trigger, and he inadvertently pulled it, killing himself on screen. It was an image, Mr. President, not from a far-off country, but from one of our Caribbean neighbors. While we complain about the incidents of crime in Barbados, and I am pleased to see that several senators, several honorable senators today took up and elaborated on themes to which I spoke last week. While we speak of the menace of crime in Barbados, and rightly so, the reality is that there is an epidemic of violent crime with guns at the center sweeping the Caribbean. Barbadians do not see the social-cultural context in which our spike in crime, and in particular our spike in gun crimes, is rooted. And I thought, therefore, that I should take some time today to frame that context and to share some of the data. In Trinidad and Tobago, there have been 200 murders for the year. Their population is, I think, 1.3 million or something of the sort. Sorry, I thought I had written it down. 1.5 million people. In March, up to March, there had been 75 murders, 60 of which had been committed with firearms. Of the 200, sir, I've not been able to get the full and accurate statistic, but the vast majority of them have been murders committed with firearms. Jamaica has a population of 2.83 million. So far this year, there have been 251 murders, 237 of which have been committed with the use of guns. St. Vincent and the Grenadines, a population of 100, 13 gun-related crimes. St. Lucia, 36 murders for the year, a population of 180,000, and you would note the relativities for our own population, sir. I'm letting people draw their own conclusions. 36 murders for the year, 25 of them have been with guns. And in Antigua and Barbuda, sir, there are 5 murders for the year so far, and 3 have been with guns. Their population is 94,000. That frames the context of the per capita murder ratio to the population. There is an epidemic of violence and gun crimes sweeping not just Barbados, but the Caribbean. And when we say that government must do something, my response, as many others today, has been or is that the whole of society must do something. But equally, we must have a Caribbean response to what is a Caribbean problem, because gangs have now become a Caribbean phenomenon connected to North America. When the call comes, and I congratulate the government for seeking to put in place scanners at both the airport and the seaport to reduce the entry of firearms into Barbados. But the reality is that with micro-island states such as our own, with very porous borders, long coastlines that are not policed, and indeed because we don't have the resources and you can't be everywhere on the coast at every time, that the possibility of landing guns north, south, east, or west of the island in the wee hours of the morning is very high. And we have to congratulate the regional security system, the police service of Barbados, and the Barbados Defense Force for their efforts. In fact, we can remember, I think it was this year, a very large drug haul with guns just in Welch's there in Christchurch, just off of Main Road, virtually where you would think was so public that criminals would not be brazen, less a mile from a police station, that you would think criminals would be so brazen that they would not land them there. But they did, and they were caught. But our question would have to be how many others at various points of our coastline and that of our sister isles were able to land successfully. So when it is said by people casually, oh, they know who bringing the guns, but then stopping them, the reality is that it is difficult to stop the importation of guns because, as I said, the porosity of our coastlines and the difficulty we have in policing it. 86% of homicides in the Caribbean are committed with firearms. Between 2018 and 2022, 73% of all guns recovered that were used in criminal activity, including murder, were manufactured in the United States. The guns that are used to kill and to maim and to harm in Barbados are manufactured in the north of our region. They're not manufactured on our islands. Buckley went out of the pipe gun business. Some used to back her. And some, when I came to the bar, sir, as a young attorney, pipe guns at Buckley were still a feature. You could go and get your papaws or you could get your pipe guns, depending on what time of the day you went and to whom you went. The pipe guns at Buckley, while they sometimes, occasionally would hit a target, they were best known for backfiring, sir, and for harming the people who intended to use them as a weapon. We have moved from the day where a man would cuss you blind, as we would say, or threaten you with big rocks. Because guns are so cheap, as Senator Kamisha told us, and readily available for purchase or for rent or for loan, people are not afraid to use them. And an offense that would have occasioned a few bad words and a threat to the family will now bring you face to face with the wrong end of an automatic weapon. This speaks to another issue, and I want to get into that issue, but I want to finish this point that I was making about the guns coming from the north, because it's a very interesting one. This legislation seeks to dampen demand and supply. But the reality is that where there is criminal activity, where there's gang activity, where there is money to be made in the drug trade, weapons are part of the use, part of the trade, sir, and people will always seek to access them. While boats are bombed for being drug boats, and we are looking at what is happening in the South. We are seeing the health, the social, the economic problems of it. The market, there is a market. And insofar as there is a demand here, it is driven by the gang majors in the north, and it is driven by the fact that guns are manufactured in the north and find their way to our shores. And we have to appeal to our friends in the north, our very dear friends in the north, to try to help us at the level of the control of crime, because it is also for their benefit, since there is cross-border gang activity. It is also affecting the countries of the north, when the gangs here can arm themselves and associate with gangs in the north, so that there has to be an equal attempt at the level of the supply chain in the market to address the guns getting here. Around 2022, sir, the country of Mexico filed a lawsuit in which it was joined by Antigua and Barbuda, Trinidad, and the Bahamas. I don't recall who else, but those three Caribbean countries for sure, in which the lawsuit alleged that manufacturers of guns in the United States, and specific gun manufacturers were named Barrett, Smith & Wesson, Beretta, Ruger, etc., were named, that they were complicit in the loss of life in Mexico and the Caribbean. In fact, the Caribbean countries joined the case, amicus curiae, friend of the court, and filed a brief in support of the case which was brought by Mexico, which alleged that these gun manufacturers were complicit in the crimes committed in the Caribbean, which were resulting in loss of life and socioeconomic harms. In 2025, I think it was, just a year ago, sir, in June of 2025, the Supreme Court of the United States threw out the case on the basis that the complainant, Mexico, had not shown that there was knowledge on the part of the gun manufacturers that the guns were making their way to the Caribbean for the purpose of doing harm. I found that fascinating from a legal perspective. In fact, if you want to draw a parallel, sir, you know that a case was brought by Vanuatu, I think it was, joined by other Caribbean countries, which allege that those causing climate change ought to be responsible in law and be made to compensate. And the International Court of Justice gave an advisory opinion agreeing with them. Now, the facts here were different, but there is no denial that there is an export market in the United States, that there's an export market in the North, and officials have already conceded that guns from the United States are making their way to Haiti and are being used in the gun violence and the gang violence that is evident there in the society at this time. I want to go back, sir, and commend not just the Honourable Minister and the government and the Attorney General, but to thank the former Attorney General. One senator speaking today said, well, this is a piece of legislation. But this piece of legislation finds nexus and support in the increase in the number of criminal courts, in the increase of the number of criminal judges, in the increase of the number of prosecutors, in the legislation which gives 10 years imprisonment for the illegal use of firearms, in the legislation which denies bail in serious offenses relating to firearms, for the trial by judge alone to speed up the processes of criminal trials, for the improvement in the terms and conditions and the better equipping of police officers, for the establishment of the Deputy Registrar of the Criminal Division of the Court to manage and expedite the processes of trials so that there are not undue delays, in anti-corruption and whistleblower legislation, and for setting up a proper forensic facilities so that the necessary linkages can be made where crimes are committed, the introduction of flexi allowances and improvement in the terms and conditions, the establishment of a new deputy commissioner, and the establishment of special constable posts, moving some of the special constables to the post of constables. Now, I repeat this even though I would have made the point last week, because we assume that when we say it once, that everybody in the public has heard. And I repeat it today because the insinuation was, well, this is only one piece of legislation, so what do you expect? It is not a single piece of legislation. It is a suite or net of legislation which is working in harmony with the social intervention measures that this government has put in place to address criminal activity and gun crimes in particular in this country. The point made by Honourable Senator Malalu that, or the suggestion that if you stopped people from having legal guns, that would be the end of the problem, is not connected or rooted in reality. The guns that are used to commit these crimes are not the guns of people who have legal firearms. They are illicit. It is an illicit or under a second-layer society behavior, antisocial behavior. And when we talk about two Barbadoses, and we like to use that expression in the context of socioeconomic differences. The reality is that when you go to the hairdresser or the nail tech, as a middle-class woman, the woman who is selling fish on the corner or working at the shop or whatever are in the same salons as you, paying the same money. They're the ones that all the crop over fets with all the hair and the nails and the new outfits and the parties that cost a lot of money. The socio-economic differences in our society are not that great. When you talk about two Barbaduses, the two Barbaduses that exist are those who live legally and those who live illegally. Those who live by way of criminal activity, who have a whole network that supports them, people that will not talk because they are supported by criminals or criminal activity. I admit that there are also those who live in fear and therefore will not talk because, as the Honourable Senator Rogers and I were speaking, I don't think you will object, earlier in the day, in a small society, everybody knows everybody else. Everybody lives in the same community. Everybody, sir, everybody is connected by some kind of relationship. I remember I was once having a conversation. With a person, and I happened to remark, oh, so-and-so is just such a disgusting person. Where she looked at me with a smile and said, that's my husband. Honest to God, sir, I tell you, no lie. So this is a society where there are all kinds of connections. And therefore, people will not talk. People will not talk about somebody who is visiting them late at night. People will not talk about somebody who is putting food in their pot. People are not going to talk about somebody with whom they grew up in school and still have a relationship with. People will not talk about somebody who is their cousin or somebody with whom they have familial connection. So really the police are up against it. Now, if the police would catch a few more people and inspire confidence, you know, it might help. But the reality is that the social networks that we have in Barbados, and I loved it when Honourable Senator Niles spoke earlier in the day about the fact that everybody knows how to get something in Barbados. It is just so true. It is part of our social fabric, and we don't even see it as dishonest. We ask no questions about how we are getting it 50% below the market price, or where it comes from, or what route did it get to your front door, how it get in your vehicle. We do not ask. We simply say, you pay for that? I don't pay for that. I can help you. I got a friend who got a friend, or I got a friend. And that's it. You get the item, and everybody is happy, and that's the end of it. So we have to look, and I've made this point before, at our social behaviors and our value systems and at what passes for acceptable, that really, when you look at it, does involve some level of criminality, because then the criminals speak to the hypocrisy of the wider society and say, well, you ain't doing it different, it's just a different of degree or the nature of what we're doing, but well, you're the same kind of criminal as me. So this is something of which we have to be conscious. So I think that all of the honourable senators who spoke to the issue of addressing our value systems, that is of great relevance, that treating to the issue at the level of the Caribbean is something which we have to do. And strengthening all our systems, and I come to these 2 points now, sir. Many people believe that there are prominent persons in Barbados who are involved in criminal activity, specifically with drugs and guns. I do not know that that is true. But the point is that people believe it. And very often, when crimes are committed, we see those who have carried the gun. We see those who have pulled the trigger. We see those who are pedaling on the blocks or out of their vehicles or bringing in the drugs on their fishing boats, etc. But we know that they are not the actuators of the criminal enterprise. We know that they are not the brains of the criminal enterprise. And we know that they're not the ones making the big profits in the criminal enterprise. And therefore, when the society sees that it is always the minnow and not the major who is brought before the courts or who faces penalties, then it reduces lack of confidence in our justice system and in our real ability to target criminal activity at the core. And that is part of the problem we have. I, sir, believe that we have to go after the entire criminal networks and enterprises. If they live in the gaps, pick them up. If they live in the housing areas, pick them up. And if they live in the heights and the terraces and the gated communities, break down the gates, sir, and pick them up. That will create a tremendous amount of confidence at the wider level of the society and may, in fact, inspire people to believe that the system is transparent and equitable, and they may, in consequence, be more inclined to say what they know. But when they believe that speaking is going to result in their own victimization or them having to pass a person in the community whom they know to be involved in certain levels of activity, albeit at the bottom, they are not going to walk past that person and feel any sense of safety or security. And why should they rat out the person in their community who only sell a little 5 bag or something, if in fact they still cost $5, only sell a little 5 bag or something, when Mr. X or Mrs. X in their high-end vehicle is going scot-free. And that is the thinking, and we have to confront it. It has to be part of how we operate within the context of the social justice system. I should have said, sir, just for the record, because I got the sense that some honourable senators were not at all familiar with the case of Mexico that I spoke about earlier, that it was in fact a $10 billion lawsuit. So it was nothing to scoff at all. The other part, sir, that we have to address is before young men would boast about having a certain type of job, and they wanted a job. They would boast about moving themselves up and their families through legal means. They would be defined. We used to talk, sir, I know when you and I would have been younger people, sir, yeah, about hard seeds and so on. And these were people, hard seeds, yeah. Sir, I'm probably adding a word to the lexicon of the younger members of the chamber, sir. But a hard seed was a person who was always very well dressed, who was moving up in their society, from poverty. There was some level of upward social mobility. You would see the house being converted from a board house to a bungalow, sir. A car, albeit a simple one, would be there. And of course, he was a hard dresser. He would be a man who, at the dances and so at some of the popular places, sir, would be buying a lot of pork chops for ladies. He would definitely be. No, you have to understand the social background, sir. There are places that, he would have a lot of girlfriends and so. And so you have to ask yourself how we moved from that perception of self to the point where a man in our society, a young man, now defines his manhood by reference to the possession or use of a firearm. That's a long, long distance to travel, sir, in a very short time. And therefore, we have to ask ourselves, what are the social interventions, the further social interventions that we need to put in place to address this difficulty and this changing value system that we are seeing, and the fact that young men, many of them, seem not interested in work, not interested in hard work, not interested in getting any skills that allow them to increase their earning capacity, but are quite willing to use guns to cause harm and to take lives. What makes it so easy for them to do so? That is a challenge that not just this country, but the entire Caribbean is facing. And the social solutions that we need to put in place would not just be peculiar to Barbados. They would have to be peculiar to the region, because, as I indicated, there is an epidemic of violence sweeping the region. The challenge that we have is that even if we put in place new social interventions that are effective, just working in corollary with these pieces of legislation that I mentioned earlier and the other social interventions, is that we will not see immediate improvement. That there has got to be a long-term program that gets to young men before they pick up the guns. But we already have a whole generation who have different norms and values and who are committed to criminal activity and do not see anything wrong with it at all, are prepared to lose their lives because they believe that in their world, life is nasty, brutish, and short. And they are prepared to live violently and die violently, and they don't expect to live. They don't expect to reach my age. They don't expect to reach 40, so they live hard, they drink hard, they take a lot of drugs, and they have these criminal enterprises which are high risk, and they, just as they are prepared to take others out, they well understand that there's a bullet with their name on it, and that is part of what comes with the choice they have made. They're very, very fatalistic about it when you speak to them, and it's almost frightening because they are so cold about it. They're very clinical, very, very analytical and very clinical. So this is a question that we have to face, and it is the multiple tiers of intervention which need to take place to effect change now, to effect change in the mid and long term, in order to see the kind of social results that the country wants. I'm satisfied, however, that in this intervening period, this legislation is a useful tool to put in the hands of the police and in the hands of the courts to help to dampen demand and supply, and to deal with those who, in spite of these measures, are still prepared to take up firearms and use them in the pursuit of crime, use them with intent to maim, disfigure, kill, sir. And I commend the work of all of those who have acted to bring this legislation to this point where we can have it to use. I hope that the police, I wish and pray for their safety and well-being as they seek to keep the nation safe. And I trust, sir, that this legislation, which I support, will have the impact that is intended. Mr. President, sir, much obliged.
Thank you very much, Her Honor Senator Thompson. Honourable Minister of
Thank you, Mr.
Criminal
President.
Justice, please go.
As I raise to do this short wrap up, I want to thank all honourable senators for their contribution today. But before I wrap up, I want to just clarify some matters that the independent senator or opposition senator, well, I just want to be clear, are made in relation to the existing court system. She did mention that and asked about the use of technology. But you know, Mr. President, in this legislation, section 27, 1, which deals, and 2, which deals with the sittings of the firearms court. I will give you a theory. It states, the firearm courts may, when required and appropriate at all times, and may conduct hearings by telephone, video conference, or other appropriate electronic means. So it is there in the legislation that they can use the available technology. I must say one good thing about COVID is that it allowed the courts to use Zoom to have hearings. I mean, it saves so much time. I must say that I had asked why we can't use Zoom hearings, particularly at the magistrate court level, where a man comes down from jail to have a hearing after being charged with possession of a firearm. Because all that person comes down to do is to get an adjournment. So to save time, and of course to save the equipment, and to ensure that the vehicles out there are not overworked, then let us expand an area at the prison, put in some more rooms, and you have the hearing just for simple adjournment, rather than you have prisoners coming down to the magistrate's court. And coming down to the magistrate's court. But I also say this as in terms of public safety, and also safety for the prison officers too. That you transport the dangerous offenders, and this can save time and save prison officers from having really to transport dangerous offenders on the road. Because I can tell you this, District C Court now, I bet you will deal with, is starting at 12:30 because St. Matthias is closed down. And we are working on that to ensure that District C can have a place that will start at 9 o'clock, or courts will start at 9 o'clock. Augustine 6 at 9 to 12:30. So the magistrate now have to get up at 12:30 and then allow the District C magistrate to come and sit to start hearing at 12:30 and sometimes end at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. And we will deal with that shortly in terms of getting a permanent place now, an alternative place for District C, so that that court can sit at 9 o'clock and finish at the appropriate time. So one solution, let us increase the Zoom hearings at the magistrate's court. I don't understand. Well, that is something as a minister responsible now that I would have to work with, and also have to speak to the line minister and the AG to ensure that we can put that in place. Now, with respect to other use of technology, because the Court of Appeal normally hears case management for appeals. And the prisoners don't come down, they do it by Zoom. So you sit in your office, you discuss the appeal, the issues, the grounds that you're doing, and then you adjourn. The Court of Appeal not do it. Bail hearings are heard by Zoom too at this time. So we can utilize the Zoom hearings more efficiently and more widely. I did a whole trial in BVA on Zoom. I was in Barbados, and doing a trial. I'm doing a trial in BVI. If we win it. That's a question? I don't know. That's a question? It's part of the course. But let me say this. And also to Senator Gurris, you made a point. I didn't do much writing, but I recall 2 points that you made. One, about overburdening prison with the fact that we're moving gun cases swiftly. I don't see any issue with that, no. If you have an overburdened prison, you can, there are ways and means, know that you can, but first, if you're overburdened prison, you'll have to look at increasing the reform programs. Of course, I'm informed that the parole legislation will be coming very shortly. So you don't have to worry about the overburdened prison. Further, it seems to me that you have a problem with putting persons who are convicted of firearms in prison. Seems to be your party philosophy. It seems to me that's what it comes across, because you're representing the party. So if you're not correcting it, I believe you're agreeing that that is your party's philosophy. That, but I don't know, but that is my view. And to say that, I believe, yes, government would seek to put reform programs in place, look to modernize the Penal System Reform Act. Further, I also would report to this chamber that we are modernizing the criminal justice system in respect of evidence. I can report to this chamber, even with respect to station diaries, even with respect to extracts on the Public Medical Journal. We no longer have, our police, our practitioners no longer have to deal with paperwork. They're being digitized. And that will save time. Because many a times, the production of extracts from the station diary, Benjamin, you know this? The extracts from Public Medical Journal cause delays in court. Considerable delays in court. You know why? Because it seems to this policy that after 5 years, this policy, I don't know where it comes from. After 5 years, a station diary that is so important to justice that puts and deals with the interaction with the suspects and policemen in custody, after 5 years, there seems to have some policy that they get rid of them or destroy them or what. That is my experience. So what we're doing now is modernizing the system, digitizing them. And that 400,000 already? That is information for the public. You can't have a system that is being delayed because of station diaries, extracts from Public Medical Journals. The doctors, it's important in it because the doctors place their findings in the Public Medical Journal. Important in sexual cases and all other cases too. And if that is missing, then the prosecution is at a disadvantage. The defense will like it. But the prosecution has a disadvantage. Now, and then all this talk about delays in the systems. It's true that the case management is an important aspect in any criminal justice system and component in the criminal justice system. It's important. I said this morning that case management is the focus of the police service now. And I say that because shortly, the police prosecutors in the magistrates court will be replaced by trained lawyers. Those trained lawyers will then have the assistance from the existing police prosecutors to guide them and to ensure that case files are ready. They'll be ready to present the cases for the crown, for the state. And that, to my mind, is a forward, in fact, a modernization of the prosecution service in Barbados. Secondly, Senator Rogers said that he wondered if it's a tactic of defense lawyers to cause delays in a trial. That is part of their defense, a modus of operating. Now, defense lawyers have to wait, in my experience, have to wait years and years for disclosure. Sometimes, the other important players, like witnesses, not in control by defense lawyers, cannot be found. It's a fact. And that sometimes the prosecution have to put the names in the paper. We need you all to come to court. So the matter have to get adjourned. But it is not. I'm no longer a defense lawyer, so I don't want to be getting up here and defending defense lawyers, but I speak about my experience. It's not a tactic. It's not a tactic. Further, the modernization of the criminal justice system, when we look at technology, I know from having meetings with the registrar that there will be technology being used in the magistrates court very shortly. And there will be improvement and enhancement in some of the magistrates court in terms of technology. I can report to this chamber on that. Yes, I can get to that now. My learned friend, Senator Benjamin, mentioned the public defender system. I, on the other hand, was